Okay. My name's Stephen Morgan. I'm the current Laird Leatherman. The title was held in August in 2015. I've been involved in the leather community for a number of years, and after winning my title last year, that's really been ramped up a little bit in terms of producing a lot more events and being a bit more visible on the leather scene than what I was previously.
So, how did you get connected to the leather scene?
Okay. I was introduced, it was almost 20 years ago now, through a mentor that said, "Oh, I'm going along to this party, would you like to come along, and you might enjoy it." And so I went along to that and thought, well, this is interesting. This is a scene that I felt comfortable in. I was a student at the time, so I couldn't really afford the expensive gear, so I taught myself how to work leather and made my first harness.
Oh, wow.
And which I actually managed to wear on the stage at during the final of IML just a couple of weeks ago.
Really?
Yeah, so I'd been kicking around in the cupboard, still in good condition, and I thought I'd be fitting to wear that.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and so that developed into a going along to the parties, and through that sort of developed into a more appreciation for the formal leather look and the wider leather community, not just the parties.
So, leather is a fairly broad church.
Mm-hmm.
Are there particular aspects of it that you have a higher interest in?
Nowadays, it's I love being in a room full of men in formal leather, and it's just the sense of belonging and I find it really attractive.
So when you say formal leather, are you talking bluff?
Not necessarily bluff, but I'd much rather be in a bar with guys that are fully clad in leather as opposed to being on a dance floor with a whole lot of guys in harnesses and jock straps.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that's and it's probably the bar scene that I find resonates more with me because of the communications that you can have with people in that environment.
Okay. So for some people see leather as a sort of like, there's the lifestyle aspects of it,
mm-hmm.
and then there are people who fetishize the actual product, the leather, the fabric. Do you meet somewhere in the middle of that? Or?
Definitely somewhere in the middle in that respect. The lifestyle I'm attracted to because it's a really sex positive lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
So people are not ashamed of their sexuality. They're not ashamed in talking about their sexual fetishes. They're a lot more open in discussing their sexuality as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you put on the fetish element of it, hearing someone move in full leather and the rubbing of the leather, and the feel of it, and when you have it on yourself, the warmth, you get a little bit sweaty in leather, it clings to you, it makes you feel a certain way.
Okay. So, because, for many people, that leather is a sensate experience, whether it be the sound, as you mentioned, or the feeling against your body. A lot of people, there's the smell as well. Does that extend beyond leather to, say, for example, rubber?
I don't like rubber, personally.
Mm-hmm.
I feel there's a slight irony here, I feel quite restricted when I've worn rubber.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fairly hairy as well,
Mm-hmm.
and usually there's a lot of sort of depilatation happening as it's going on and off.
Absolutely, there can be tears before bedtime
Yeah.
in non-chlorinated rubber.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would imagine over 20 years you've gathered a small collection of leather gear.
Yes.
So the formal leather is the particular key element that you really like?
Yeah, that's what resonates with me most. My favourite piece of leather is a pair of boots that I've had for probably about 10-15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they were bought second hand in a disposal store in Berlin.
Wow.
And they're a full patrol boot, so without any zips or buckles, so
Mm-hmm.
you've got to work to get them on.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I think, part of the appeal. But I put these on in that store, and they fitted me like a glove.
Wow.
So that it was like someone had worn those boots in for me.
Mm.
They're not pristine. They're very well looked after. They're very, very well kept. But every time I put them on, it's like, it's like for me, it'd be like putting on a mask. It's like I'm putting on these boots that encase everything through the lower leg.
You've been in the leather scene for 20 years here in Melbourne.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you compete in the Laird Leatherman competition?
I got to a point where I wanted to give back.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is that I'd been through some tough times in the previous 4 or 5 years, and initially part of my way of dealing with that was turning my back on the leather scene. But it was actually my mates in the leather community that helped me get through those times. And so I think I reached to a point where it's like, this is a community that's helped me through the tough times, and it's time for me to step up and give back a little bit more.
Okay. So what is your giving back? What's your gift to the community?
I wanted to, and the main sort of platform of the previous title year was to increase the visibility of the leather community to a wider audience. And there is a perception of those that aren't involved with the leather community that it is kinksters and deviants and everything, and I totally accept that and take that on board and quite happily. But I wanted to be able to show to some other people in the community that that's not something to be afraid of. That's something that should be celebrated, and in doing that, it's only going to help the community. I mean, there's some great organisations in Melbourne like the Leather Mob that are exposing the leather community to a lot broader base of younger supporters. I pushed it a little in a slightly different way, and the main event that I ran, which I'll continue to run on an annual basis, was the High Cow Charity Dinner. And it was very specific in trying to make sure that wasn't just guys in formal leather. It was a formal and a high cow dinner.
Yep.
So about 30% of the attendees at that were not necessarily leathermen. They were people and some quite well-respected senior members of our community that came along and got to experience what it was like to be in a room full of men with leather. And they, the feedback from them was fantastic, and it really did take away some of their misconceptions of the leather community. Another high point in the previous year was getting to address a charity function, and I was speaking with Rowena Allen, which is our Commissioner for Gender Equality, appointed by the state government. So she spoke and I spoke, and then afterwards we got to have a really good discourse, and it was we've managed to keep in touch, and there's been a little bit of to and fro, and what really struck me was that she said, is there anything that the Commissioner can do for the leather community? And to be able to build that bridge is something that I've felt really quite...
So what sort of topics did you talk to her about?
I spoke mostly about my story, and often in a public speaking context, if you can just describe your story or your... I always reticent about using the term journey. It comes across as very authentic, and people resonate with that, and people find that often much more interesting than pushing just forward on a particular issue or topic or an agenda. And so yeah, we've
sort of you've met at an equal ground, and okay,
and she in that particular function, she came across us with the same way. So yeah.
So what topics do need to be addressed from an equity perspective within the greater community and the leather community?
I think one of the biggest issues we'll be facing over the next particularly 2 months, depending on the results of the election, is the effect on running a plebiscite will have on the suicide rates of LGBTI. From what I've heard is that with the recent attack on the Safe Schools Coalition, the number of suicides actually peaked at that, because that sends a very damaging message to particularly young people, and it doesn't doesn't necessarily mean young in age, but young people in terms of where they are on their gay or lesbian timeline. That if you've got the government saying your sexuality is bad, your sexuality is wrong, then they're going to, that message is going to filter through. So if we can try and mitigate some of those concerns during the plebiscite, if the Liberal government gets in, it'll be helpful for the community. That's probably one of the most pressing issues facing the LGBTI community.
And we've had a pretty fucking clear message just this week.
Yeah, with Orlando. I don't believe it's a terrorist attack. I believe it is someone who was raised with a religion that taught them that they were wrong, that their sexuality was wrong, and that their inability to accept their own sexuality was enough for them to flip into the role of a killer, to deal with their own self-hatred and self-loathing. My biggest concern with that is the availability of assault-type weapons in the USA, because that's what facilitates the ability for these events to happen.
Absolutely, and you know, I don't want to go into the politics of guns, but certainly we can see in societies that don't have access to guns, they don't tend to have mass shootings. Japan, Australia, two very clear examples of lack of access to gun greatly reduces the pool of access and blah blah blah. So for all of the NRA members who've just switched off this thing, we can continue the interview.
I have no concerns in annoying the NRA, but that's coming from an Australian perspective where we don't have that same idealisation of guns as being necessary.
And we certainly don't have a legal statute that says that you have a right to carry a gun as well. So you entered the Laird Leatherman competition. Were you expecting to win?
No. I went in it for a lot of fun, and the build again. Trying to explain what the lead up to a contest is like is again where most of the enjoyment comes from. Okay. In Melbourne, we had a Facebook group that was a whole lot of banter, and what it does is it allows the people that are sort of competing together for a title to bond in a way that you don't get as easily in just sort of day-to-day contact. Yep. And so out of the Laird Leatherman, I got five good mates that you know.
It was a good mix of people as well. Like you know, you've got young, like say for example, Darby is a young dom who's really advancing from his skill set and his presence in the community as well in many aspects. So it's good to see, dare I say, old guard versus new guard. I know, controversy so early. But, and this is a topic I want to talk about in a minute, but about mentorship and about that we did lose a generation of educated Leathermen, and where do we go to fill that gap?
I think that gap's starting to be filled. Thankfully, we've had close to a generation of people not being wiped out through AIDS, and that means that there's a lot more experience in the community now than what there might have been, say, 10 or 15 years ago, where there were, you know, the worst times of the AIDS crisis. Having role models for younger people to look up to is kind of important, and if they don't have them, then there is there's no path to follow. And I'm not. This is probably leaning towards the old guard and new guard, and you know, I've got some pretty interesting ideas on this. But the old guard, I think, as an idea of having a a committee or people that set traditions and things is probably a bit of a fallacy and not something that is actually happened. But when you've got a vacuum of information, then it's very easy to mythologize something that people would want.
I think there's stuff to be learnt from protocol though, and respect.
Yeah.
And I think there are some new members of various fetishes, whether that be, I come from a pup play perspective, but I think that what within the pup community we've learned is respect and protocol and like care of collars and things like that. And I think that from what I can understand, that protocols I think are a very useful thing, but as for a table of elders making decisions, well, I've yet to see strong evidence of that.
I don't think there is any evidence of that, and that's where traditions are important. But traditions shouldn't be set in concrete. They should be, each generation should be able to create their own, and those that work and those that the community finds valuable are the ones that will continue over time and from generation to generation. And they're probably the ones that will become protocol with time.
And I think with bringing new people in, that this is an important thing because they bring in new perspectives, new ideas, and it's not just an old bunch of fogies sitting around.
Well, that's where the old guard, so to speak, needs to be much more respectful of the younger community and realise that they're going to do things differently. They're going to do things that put traditionalists out of their comfort zone. But they also have the lifeblood of the community, and without them, the leather community is not going to survive.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to support a future generation of...
And we've got as much to learn from them as they've got to learn from us. And I think that mutual respect is something that's going to encourage a lot more younger people to get involved with the community.